We're trying to think other examples where your human intuition believes one thing, and in reality statistics, if you put the numbers down, show
Tells you
another
another thing, yes. So the chances that one pair has a common birthday is much higher because there are more.
True.
So that's the main thing.
I feel like everybody knows what they have to do. You don't need somebody to tell you. You already know. But I don't know why. Just a very small percentage of us ends up doing it and following it and becomes successful no matter what they define success.
That's a huge topic for discussion.
This episode is gonna be different.
We started already.
Should we?
Okay. There's always something happening and we make plans.
But this is actually
they go awry.
Startup life. Every time you have to adjust.
We are going to be discussing about pivoting.
Right?
We will tie this up.
It will all make sense soon.
The following section.
So today we'll not have a guest, I guess. They already know from the thumbnail.
We are basically going to pick up where we left on the previous episode, where Yannis basically told us a story, how we were all connected with the Secret Santa event we host every year. You were his Secret Santa and he was my Secret Santa.
Exactly. We ended the episode saying, what are the chances?
We actually calculated the chances.
We ended the episode answering
yes.
the exact same question.
What were the chances?
0.069.
Okay.
Actually, you calculated it. I have to give you the credits.
Yeah. It's not that hard a calculation. Yeah, I mean, if you know the amount of people in the Secret Santa pool, it's a very simple calculation. It's,
true.
I think it was 122 that participated. So the calculation that something like that happens with us three is 1 over 121 times 1 over 120, because 1 is removed from the pool in order to be the Secret Santa for someone else.
Okay, so you did it properly.
Yeah, it's very simple.
And the thing is that discussing, seeing this number brought in mind that when you see the episode like 3 people and say, you were my Secret Santa and I was his Secret Santa, and we sit in the same order and blah blah blah, you think that, okay, what are the chances? But you don't think that the number is that small. We're trying to think other examples where your human intuition believes one thing, and in reality statistics, if you put the numbers down, show another thing.
Yes. The next thing that comes to mind with numbers and that challenges our intuition is something like the very common birthday paradox, where you have in a room of say 50 people, what are the chances that there is a pair, so 2 people, that have the same birthday? And the first intuitive answer is it's going to be real small, the chance, because there are 365 days, not accounting for leap years. In a year, each day has a chance to be a birthday. We only have 50 people, so the chances are probably small. In reality, I think if you have more than something like 23, I think the chances are like 50-50.
Okay.
I don't remember the exact number, but
let's check the numbers to give the exact.
But that thing is not exactly a paradox technically. Paradox is something where the logic breaks down.
Of course.
Or you start with a true statement and you end up with a false conclusion. Technically a contradiction. So when you have a contradiction like that, that's a paradox.
GPT actually tells me that if you have 50 people,
yes,
the chances are approximately 97%.
Yes. So at 23 is about half and half.
Okay, let me double check. It's 23 people to have 50%. Yeah, 50-50. And this is actually paradoxical in the loose sense that we just created, because when you think about it fast, you are like 1 divided by 365. This number doesn't make sense at all. If you have 23 people, it's 50, two of them have the same birthday.
Yeah, because
actually,
technically you enter the domain of combinatrix, I think they're called. So
okay, sounds kinky as a term.
Okay. Is it PG-13 this episode?
I didn't say more.
Okay. And I don't think the human mind is very adept at intuitively grasping combinations and what are the chances of creating pairs. It's not like the
winning the lottery, for instance.
The music chairs, where you have 5 people in 4 chairs and you have to fill each chair with a person. You have to think of how many pairs there are. And there are quite a lot of pairs. So the chances that one of those pairs hits the bullseye, for example, on having the same birthday is much higher because there are a lot more pairs than 50 if you have 50 people.
I think simplify the logic is that if I am one of the 23 people, I have birthday at 10 of March. If I'm not paired with anybody, you exclude 10 of March to count the rest of the people. And then you take the second, if he is not a pair, you exclude his date as well. So the days, every person you check, they decrease. I think this is one of the mistakes we don't really think.
The basic mistake is that you have to count the number of distinct pairs, not the number of persons versus the number of days in a year. And there are more pairs than there are persons.
Okay, yeah.
So the chances that one pair has a common birthday is much higher because there are more.
True.
So that's the main thing.
Yeah.
For this, not exactly paradox, but this, interesting counterintuitive phenomenon.
That was the best word, actually.
Yeah.
Not paradox.
And it's very hard to describe in simple terms something that is counterintuitive, because the mind basically revolts. Doesn't want to accept it. It doesn't make sense at first glance.
Yeah.
So to put it in simple terms is a difficult task.
Yeah. But if you are a little bit familiar with mathematics or statistics, the moment you put it down on a paper, it makes complete sense, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
We can describe a few
if
more.
If you are a geek, it's very interesting.
So because
to put these things under the microscope.
Most of us here are, in one form or another, or in differing degrees, geeks. So.
For sure.
So be prepared. This is going to be a geeky,
this is a geeky
nerdy episode. So a lot
Put your glasses on.
math stats and stuff like that. But we're going to try to tie this up with or relate it to startups and Starttech, and how some of those counterintuitive phenomena or instances
can be lessons, actually.
Yes.
Right.
Very nice. Yes, lessons.
I think you should lead the conversation because, to be honest, this is closer to your subject and closer to your everyday life in Starttech.
And it's closer to my academic background.
Of course, for sure.
Something like that.
For sure. So I can be the dumb guy today that you explain stuff.
Suits me. What's next on the list then?
Actually, I think one of the most related ones, it's the survivorship bias, right? This one is very simple, actually. Maybe I can try to explain it.
It's all these are very simple when
it's very theoretical.
When someone describes them to you. Yeah, they actually make sense after a while.
Yeah.
But at first glance or at first contact with it, they can sound a little They sound weird. It has a very nice real story behind it. And I think it's one of the most relevant to everyday running of a startup.
Yeah, I think it comes up a lot in meeting rooms, or like a lot of, it's like a pitfall that a lot of people will make the mistake to go through there.
It's a very common thing in discussions, startup pitches, discussions with founders, presentations of startups and so on, or news about startups. It's very common.
Let's say what it is first.
Yes.
So the people are not familiar, because somebody might also be familiar with it, but that doesn't know the name Survivorship Bias.
Yes, I think the ones we've picked are some of the most common ones. So we didn't go for any obscure, little-known paradox and
of course, because also you will need this half a book to explain some of them. It's too technical.
Maybe, yes.
Anyways, so this one is when actually, for me, it happens a lot in discussion with YouTubers, for instance, that I want to do what this guy does and follow his recipe because he made it super fast to 10K subs. But the mistake of this logic is that there are millions or hundreds or thousands of other, for sure thousands of other people that tried the same recipe, and because they didn't end up to be a success story, you don't know their names. You never hear about them. So you see on a lot of fields like startups that you just see the top picks and they become super famous and everybody knows their name. There are thousands of others that try very similar approaches, very similar ideas and failed, and you don't have the data for them.
Yes, exactly. The thing is that we focus way too much on the, let's say, winners, and the data for that is very limited, and we lose a lot of information by not having the stories from the losing side, let's call it like that. The story behind that phenomenon goes back to Second World War.
Okay.
Okay, so what we had basically was a team of arm analysts who decided that we should find ways to reduce the probability of a plane going down.
Okay.
So what are we going to do? Let's look at all the planes that came back, look at all the bullet holes on the frame of a plane, and we should probably reinforce those places and then send them to the next mission.
On first glance, sounds...
Yes, sounds kind of reasonable, but then when you start thinking about it for more than a few minutes, you're gonna go, okay, wait a second. What about all those other planes that didn't return? The ones that return have bullet holes here, here, and here. So maybe those places are not so critical.
Right.
We should reinforce the other parts that do not have bullet holes.
Yeah, of course.
Because that's where the ones that got shot down were hit.
Didn't return, yeah, of course.
Because you don't have the data from the fallen planes, you only have the data from the surviving planes, hence survivorship bias. So we look at the data from winners and disregard data from losers. And there are a lot of things that we can learn from that, because in the startup world, there are far more startups that fail and very few unicorns or success stories. And we always try to imitate, try to look at what the winners did, and let's imitate that. We never go, okay, what did the losers do? Maybe I shouldn't do that.
How can we avoid something?
Because they never get the light of day, those cases.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have a saying for that.
Okay.
You know, winning is inspirational. It inspires you, you know, it motivates you. But losing is instructional. You learn more from losing. And it's, you know, it's a common saying that you learn from your mistakes. And you do learn more from mistakes and losing than from winning.
Yeah, that's
you know,
true.
another example is the very common kids puzzle with a maze.
Okay.
Where you have to start from point A, you go through a maze to end up exit the maze. So now imagine that you do not see the whole maze, just the start, and only the parts that you sketch with your pen are revealed.
All right.
Okay, if you go to the exit, first try, you didn't learn anything.
Right.
You just picked randomly at any crossroads and you ended up in the exit. But when you come at a junction, you have to sketch your way into a dead end, come back.
Try to remember.
You learn that this is the wrong way. Now let me try another one. You try another one, maybe it ends up again in a dead end after a few turns and twists. And at the end, you discover which is the correct path.
Yeah, very nice example, actually. And also,
that's very, very relevant to any startup, basically. And I think it ties up with the philosophy here at Startup, that we do not try to discover or create the next unicorn. I think Dimitris does often say that we care about workhorses, not unicorns.
This one has a lot of different topics that you can apply it actually and learn from it. Mm-hmm. Even sports, gymnastics, it doesn't matter how many times you fell, but how many times you stand up, kind of like that. You want to take the number 2 yourself.
Okay, for number 2, we pick the Monty Hall problem.
Yeah.
I think Monty Hall was, in the US, some famous presenter of a quiz show on TV or something like that.
But also, every country, I think, had the equivalent of that show.
Every country had an equivalent quiz show where you win prizes by picking the correct door.
Yeah, you have 3 doors.
Yeah. And
you have to pick one.
You pick one. Behind one of those doors is a big prize, a car or whatever, or a big sum of money. Something not valuable in the other 2.
Yeah.
I think in Greece we had some comedically obese person called the Zonk.
Oh my God.
I think in the US they had goats or pictures of goats or animals or whatever.
Nice.
And how it goes is you pick one at random. So you have 1 in 3 chances of picking correctly, and 2 in 3 chances of making a mistake, let's say.
Yeah.
Of choosing poorly, as the Crusader said in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Then the presenter opens one of those doors, one of the other doors that you didn't pick. Obviously, he knows where the big prize is, so he picks one of those doors with no prize behind it. And he typically asks, do you want to change your decision? If you pick door A and the presenter opened door C, do you want to pick door B now? Or do you going to stick to your decision? Again, intuition at first glance tells you that it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It's a 50-50 chance, whatever I pick, it's not going to make any difference. In reality, it makes a big difference. So you should always take the switch.
Okay. Let's explain.
The simple way of explaining it without going into any statistics or maths or anything is the presenter gave you new actionable information. Door C doesn't have the price. And in light of new information, you should reevaluate your decisions.
Okay.
That's a lesson. That's the lesson you can draw from that. Okay. To try to explain it in as simple terms as possible, what happens is there's 1 in 3 chances of getting the correct answer, 2 in 3 of getting the wrong answer. And what happens when the one door opens? Basically, the 2 in 3 chances are sort of transferred into the other option that you didn't pick. So picking the other door gives you 2 in 3 chances of being correct.
Yeah, I think the thing is that when you choose in the beginning, you're 1 in 3, of course. Then he opens one door, and now you have different data, it's 1 on 2, so it's 50-50 if you pick now. Because one door opened. Before, when you chose 1 on 3, it was 33%.
Yes, but not exactly.
But now it became 50-50.
No, but by switching, you have a total of 2 in 3 chances of winning.
Okay. Yeah.
Your chances basically double if you take the switch.
Okay. In the beginning, it was
now those
1 and 3,
chances
1 and 3,
remain
1 and
the
3.
same, but they are transferring to one door.
Okay.
That's a way of thinking about it.
So now you have 2 in 3.
Yes, you have 2 in 3. Yes, yes. You double your chances basically.
Okay.
In light of new evidence. And that's the critical part, in light of new evidence.
All right.
And that's basically what every startup does, or if it doesn't, it should do.
And you know what's the thing? In real life, and in the game as well, I think it's very the ego that jumps in. That you are right, like, especially in startups, I made a decision in the beginning, and now if I pivot, I'm gonna admit that I made the wrong decision, and I don't wanna deal with that.
There's certainly that type of, founder bias or founder ego that plays into decision makes in the business world in general, and even more in the startup.
And that's why I think you have to have to build a team in a way that it's not an echo chamber. Like they are free to let you know if they think you do a mistake. They have to be free to tell you, listen, you're not thinking correctly on this or that or whatever, I don't know.
The important point here is in light of new evidence.
Yeah, true.
With new evidence comes in light, whether that's new data, new insights from, analyze a data set or whatever it is, or new feedback from a customer or user, you have to reevaluate your decisions and your positions.
Of course.
And that's where, in an extreme case, you have to decide it's time to pivot.
Yeah.
And,
or change your priorities. It might be something less important.
That's why I say in extreme cases, maybe a pivot is warranted. But in most cases, yes, you have to maybe decide that, okay, I might have to build this feature first instead of what I planned. Maybe my target audience is X instead of Y that I thought at the beginning. Maybe this pricing plan is better than the one I have already. Because whatever. I mean, in light of new evidence, there's always a chance that, if the evidence is substantial, that you have to course correct.
Of course.
And that's I think the main thing. I mean, if I have to take one thing and say this is what better predicts the success of a startup is the effectiveness in course correcting.
Okay.
Because usually startups operate in a space with a lot of uncertainty. They don't know exactly who the customer is. Maybe they have some initial product market fit, but they're not completely certain. They have to make some judgment calls about which features to prioritize or how much they're going to price their product and so on and so forth. And when data comes in, you have to go back and say, okay, maybe this needs to change because we learned this thing.
Yeah.
So in light of new evidence, always go back and reevaluate your assumptions.
Amazing. Awesome.
That's the moral from the Monty Hall Problem. And there is a famous quote, I think, from German, Austrian, or something like that.
Right.
A general who said that no plan survives first contact with the enemy. When you have a plan or assumption, and then you have to compare it against reality, which is messy in a lot of ways.
Chaotic.
A lot of your assumptions are going to be challenged, if not completely rejected.
Let's move to number 3, as I have them here. So this is the Simpson paradox. It doesn't have to do with the cartoon Simpsons, right?
I don't think so, no.
So this one is very interesting when you look at it in a paper. I think we will have to dive a little bit deeper in order to explain it properly.
Okay.
To throw some numbers. Actually, I will put on graphics.
Okay, great.
So the one example I want to give is that let's say you have a university that has two departments. Department A is very competitive.
Okay.
And it's very hard to go inside. Department B is less competitive and it's easier to make it inside.
To be admitted, though.
Yeah. Let's say that most women apply to Department A and most men apply to Department B.
Okay. They want the easy way in.
Yeah.
The guys.
On Department A, we have 90 applicants from women and 27 are admitted. So the admission rate for the woman is 30%.
Okay.
We have in the same department 10 men admitting, and 2 of them actually get inside. So we have 20% admission rate for the men. So the rate is 30 for women, 20 for men.
Okay, for Department A.
Yeah.
The tough one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Women are higher numbers. Let's go on Department B now and analyze. There we have 10 women, a smaller amount, and 8 of them are admitted.
Okay,
so
80%.
They create an 80% admission rate.
All right.
And at the same time, we have 90 men and 54
buggers.
are admitted.
Going for the easy solution.
So we have 60% admission rate.
Okay.
The numbers are here.
Yeah.
So you can see them because they will be seeing them over there.
Okay.
If you see admission rate, you go to Department A, women have 30%. It's more.
They have higher rates
they have
in
higher
both departments.
In both departments.
Yeah.
And it creates the idea intuitively that in the whole university there's more women than men.
But what happens when you add them up?
Free to make this. The thing is that when you actually add them up, as you predicted we were gonna do.
Yeah. The overall admission rate?
In 100 applicants as women, we have 35 admitted, which is 35%.
For both
and
departments.
And in 100 men applicants, we have 56 admitted.
Okay.
So the men are actually...
So the aggregate admission rate is higher for men than women, but if you look at each department separately, it's higher for women in both departments.
Yeah, like the number of men is actually higher than women in this example. Even though the admission rate, if you just look only the admission rate, it gives you a very different idea about the numbers.
You know, that mistake or related mistakes are very common.
Of course. It's super easy to make assumptions, actually. And ignore before you shed light who...
You know, the aggregate picture it actually hides what happens in the segments.
I just want to say, of course, there is a chance that if I tweak the numbers of the admissions, that the admission rate and the popularity of the woman over men will match. But this is a very nice example that actually it is describing the Simpson paradox.
That one is related to a lot of data mishandling. People will often look at, for example, percentages or ratios, which are the bane of any amateur data analyst.
It's more sexy.
And you're going to see the conversion rates, for example. Okay, this is a very common metric in any startup and any marketing department or whatever. You see conversion rates for your whole traffic you receive in your website. How many website visitors become registrations or trial users. And you see the overall conversion rate be 5%. Okay. But that traffic comes from different channels.
Of course.
You know, Google ads, Facebook ads, or Meta ads, organic traffic, referrals, and so on and so forth. You might say, okay, Google ads is 10%, Bing ads is 3%, and so on. You can try calculate the average by adding all these percentages and then dividing them by the number of percentages, which is wrong. This is related, it's not exactly the same, but it's related to that Simpson's paradox. Because you cannot take averages of ratios. You have to do the sum of the events divided by the sum of all the traffic to get the average of the conversion rate, for example.
Yeah.
Or I think we discussed one case in one of our meetings about a car traveling from A to B, and that it does part of the journey driving at 50 miles an hour, and the second part of the journey at 150 miles an hour. What's the average speed from traveling from A to B? And if you try to add those speeds and divide by 2, okay, you get 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
But that's the wrong answer, because you don't know for how long, distance or time-wise, did it drive at speed A and speed B. Because if you drove 90% of the distance at 50 miles an hour and 10% of the distance at 150 miles an hour, the average is not going to be 100.
Yeah.
It's going to be very close to 50.
Like kind of the gravity of its number, it's hidden in the...
Yes, but Simpson's paradox is the idea that you have a low resolution wide angle view of something. It's very different to the high resolution narrow angle deep dive view of something.
Yeah, and what I'm taking away...
one hides the other.
It's that you shouldn't make assumptions that easily before you analyze the data properly.
Yes. And the other related statistical fallacy to the Simpson paradox is the overuse of summary metrics. For example, averages, medians, deviations, and those things. And there is a famous, maybe famous is not the right word, but a well-known example, it's called, I think, the Anscombe Quartet.
Oh, okay.
There are 4 different data sets, and they all have the same averages and medians and so on. The exact same summary metrics. But when you plot those 4 graphs, they're completely different. One is a straight line, a linear relationship. One is a line perpendicular to the x-axis. One is a power function or whatever. I don't remember exactly which ones. And they are completely different. They have no relationship between them. And they all tell a different story, because that's what data tell effectively, a different story. But they have the same summary metrics. So if you look at the summary metrics, you might think they are the same data sets, but they are completely different data sets. So don't be fooled by summary or aggregated metrics. You have to always deep down, segment, and so on.
Okay. Do you think that people can actually use all these paradoxes to create a different idea or tell a different story to somebody? Like, to take advantage of the numbers?
I think it's very common practice, especially in like politics or in the, in the public discussion in the media, yes, I think.
Very interesting.
Lawyers maybe do that a lot. But maybe that's because they don't know anything about those things, not because of malice.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think there is a very nice book. I don't remember the title exactly. It's something like How to Lie with Statistics or How to Lie with Numbers or something like that.
Okay.
Because it's a very effective way. I mean, if you have an unsuspecting crowd,
yeah, of course,
you can present certain types of data in a way to reinforce your own story and narrative.
Of course. And when you throw the numbers, people usually look at you as
That's why what you said earlier is very important. That you should be very wary of echo chambers. Because you present a set of data, you tell a story based on that set of data. And if you don't allow for others to challenge it, there's probably something fishy going on. If you, for example, suppress the other's ability to challenge your story, something's going on.
Yeah, true.
Reinforcing what you said earlier, that for a startup founder, he should try to have people around him that are not, yes men.
Yeah.
They have to challenge you, and through that, you're gonna discover more insights, optimize your positions, and reevaluate everything in your hypothesis. And I'm gonna also add a pet peeve of mine, and also a warning, because there's a lot of times you get stuff thrown out about consensus. Science and the scientific method, whatever that is, and I won't go into any depth about that, does not rely on consensus. If we did rely on consensus, we would still be in the Stone Age. A new idea has to come around, and it doesn't depend on how many people support it. It depends on whether it's true, in a sense, whatever that true may be, and by using it, you produce better results, or more accurate. Whether you can predict something more accurately than what came before you. That's what determines whether a theory survives or a hypothesis survives. Not whether a lot of people believe it.
Of course,
because we'll be in the Stone Age. We'll still be in caves. A certain amount of dissent is very healthy in any society.
It happened to me yesterday.
And especially in a startup.
There's a movie, if you know it, it's called Ex Machina. I don't know if you've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
I
remember the video game.
Okay.
Oh, no, that's Ex Deus.
Deus, yeah.
Yes, sorry.
It's different. It's about a guy that gets invited to see, they built an AI robot, and they want to see if they can convince him that it's a human-like, actually.
Yeah.
They actually made the
There's also quite famous with Tom Cruise, I think it was called. Minority Report.
Okay.
Again, it's the same concept there.
The thing is that when the movie came out, I think it was something like 10 years ago, something like that, a lot of people watched it and said, this is too fake, man. I didn't like the movie because it's too fake. It's not possible to have a conversation with a robot and be
fast forward now.
And now that I watched it, I'm like, we are almost there. GPT, if you talk to it, it talks fluently back to you and it gives you the feeling that you are interacting with a human. The only thing missing is the technical to build the body.
Yeah.
And when you watched a movie 10 years ago, you would say, okay, we can build the body, but it's impossible to make it talk like a human. And isn't it related to this? If everybody believed that it's impossible to make the robot talk like human, we would not build ChatGPT by now.
Consensus doesn't relate to truth. That's another way of putting it. Whether a lot of us believe in,
we can fly, airplanes.
The sky is green doesn't make it green. So yes, always have a team that will be there to challenge you, and in a good way, because what we want is to discover the most insights we can from the information we have.
It's a very fine balance though, because a lot of people, for instance, let's say Yoda, that they had an idea to pivot in that way, and everybody was opposing them.
Yes, maybe not everyone, but there wasn't a consensus to support that decision, yes.
That it's a fine line, always. You are in the balance, until you are one of the sides is proven right.
You want to avoid the echo chamber, but you also want to avoid, on the other hand, the analysis paralysis.
Exactly, yeah.
Don't overanalyze everything. It's going to take too much time. If you try to, discover something, the absolute truth.
I think this is a very nice piece of the puzzle is the lean methodology and approach and mindset.
And what we said earlier about the Monty Hall, with every step you take, new...
Read the numbers, I guess.
Yes, new evidence comes to light, new data, you receive new data. You have to look at those and start course correcting. So it's usually more effective to, don't have an echo chamber, discuss what you know and what your next step and decision is gonna be. Don't overdo it, and always have, as Dimitri says, and as we try to, and the way we try to act here, always have a bias to action. Okay, discuss, debate, argue, but then you have to take an action.
Yeah.
And with that reaction, you're gonna receive new information and new data. Reevaluate those, take a new action based on those. And, it's not gonna be like a linear trajectory. It's gonna be like this.
Yeah.
But, if you do that enough times, you're probably gonna end up somewhere better from where you started.
True. Now we can move on number 4. The base rate fallacy.
That's a fun one.
You want to take it?
It's a fun one because of the typical example used in describing it.
All right. So you take it.
Okay. To give a high level overview, and because we always view all those we discussed from a lens of it being a lesson.
Yeah. Okay.
And the lesson here is to try to ignore outliers. Because something spectacular happened at one instance doesn't mean that's the rule.
Yeah.
That's a basic lesson here. But the base rate fallacy is that sometimes we ignore the actual probability of something happen, and when something rare happens, we try to jump on board it. So we over-celebrate when a big success comes in. Disappointment settles in with a bad result. And maybe the bad result or the exceptional win is a rare occasion, an outlier. Don't over-focus on those two. The usual example for the base fallacy, what you're probably gonna see a lot in the literature or in videos or in websites, is about the breathalyzer test. So you have a DUI, I think they're called.
For the alcohol.
Drinking under influence stops, where the police sets them. And the base rate for randomly picking a driver at a random time, random place, and the chances of him being drunk is, say, 1 in 1,000.
Okay.
Random place, random time. And you have a breathalyzer that has a 99% accuracy, so 1% of producing a false positive. So they stop you in a DUI. DUIs are the term for what in Greece we call alkotest. Bloko. Okay. So they stop you in a DUI and you take a breathalyzer test and it shows, it lights up, it's positive. What are the chances of you being actually drunk?
It's 1 in 1,000, right? As you said earlier.
No.
To be actually drunk.
Yes, to be actually drunk. But you have your breathalyzer test, you breathe, comes out positive.
But in 100 people, it will give one of them a false positive. Yeah?
Yes.
But
in 1,000 people, you're going to give 10.
Yeah.
10 false positives.
10 false positives.
One is going to be negative. One is going to be the real drunk. But the actual probability of you being drunk is not 99%, exactly. Which is the accuracy of the device.
And when you hear 99%...
Your actual probability is like 1 over 11, like 9.9% or something close to that. However, because there's a big however here, if they stop you and the result comes positive in a breathalyzer test, don't argue with the officer, because that ignores another part of the issue. The base rate we stated before, 1 in 1,000, is for a random person, random time, random place.
Yeah.
But DUI stops are not placed in random times and places.
True.
They are placed at night, close to a route where a lot of bar, club goers take to return home.
And usually the stop also...
the chances of those people being stopped to the base rate for those people at that time, at that place, to be actually drunk, might be 1 in 3, 1 in 2, or something close to...
True.
Close to 1. And a lot of the times they're going to give you a second one.
Yeah.
In a real case of a breathalyzer test, the chances of actually being drunk with a positive result is very close to the accuracy of the device.
True. But to come back on the example numbers, when you hear 99%, your brain thinks good enough.
Yes.
And
But
in this case, it's not at all good enough.
It ignores the base rate.
Yeah.
How common the actual event is in the general population. Or another way of putting it is, don't confuse accuracy for truth. How accurate the device is of determining a result doesn't mean that that result is true.
Also with Simpson's paradox, don't make assumptions, because I didn't know that it's a 1 in 1,000, for instance.
In all of this, there is an underlying lesson in all of them. All that we discuss is that context is king, queen, prince, duke, and everything. Without the context, numbers and statistics doesn't mean anything. It literally doesn't mean anything. They don't tell you anything. And it's very easy to mislead you. Without the proper context, you cannot go from data to information and insights and knowledge at the end. But you need the context. Without the context, for example, the context for the basic example of the base rate fallacy is, a random person, the random time, at a random place.
Yeah.
The actual case is a specific time for a specific person at a specific place.
And to be honest,
and that changes the whole context, changes the base rate, and gives you a completely different answer for the question, are you actually... Of course.
Because that's the job of the policeman to stop. And also they do other stuff as well. Like if they have another group ahead, if they see somebody speeding, they give the number, stop this.
Also, they have noses.
Yeah.
Usually, if you're drunk, you can tell by the smell. A signal in isolation, an outlier, a great success in our marketing, a great success in sales. That's one instance in 1,000. Creates a distorted image of how things are going. Yeah. Don't try to
be a little bit modest, I guess.
More modest and more careful about, what's the typical...
give it time to show...
What is the context? Let's say, for example, one of our companies, we have customers that pay a subscription of an average of $100 per month. And then another case comes, whereas, for example, for Dream Class, it's a big school with a lot of campuses, a lot of students, and it's like a few thousand per month. Yay, great success, It is, obviously. It's a lot of money, all of a sudden. But that's an outlier. Your usual customers and target audience is not going to be that.
Like if you see this, you expect to keep going like that, you mean? Yeah, but it's not, kind of.
Anyway. That kind of ties to our next one, which basically there are two related ones.
All right.
It's the gambler's fallacy and the regression to the mean.
Oh, okay.
Very different in nature, both of those. Related in a way. So the gambler's fallacy is about the hot streak you might have, or the bad streak you might have, whether it's going to continue or not. A gambler might have 2 bad hands, and he's going to think, okay, this is not my day, it's always going to be bad hand. Let me put it like that. Probabilities don't have memory.
Okay, yeah.
So you spin a coin, okay? It comes up heads. What are the chances of the next spin to be heads?
50-50.
And again, it's heads. The third one, the third spin. What's the chance of the third spin to be heads?
I'm doing that, actually. Like, sometimes when I was younger...
What are the chances?
It's always 50-50.
It's always 50-50.
But
every spin of the coin doesn't recall what's the previous one.
I did once, two, thrice, whatever, and then you're like, it's not 50-50 anymore because I had 3 in a row.
Yes, and people do tend to fall into that fallacy. Every spin is not connected to the previous one. The first spin doesn't affect the second, and the second doesn't affect the third, and so on. So you might very well get in a scenario that you spin the coin 10 times and 10 times it's heads, assuming a fair coin. Okay? So context again matters in a way. Assuming a fair coin, if you spin it infinite times, the probability is going to tend to 50-50. Yeah. All right, 50% heads, 50% tails. But for a limited sample, yeah, you might as well get 10 tails or 10 heads in a row. But one spin doesn't affect the previous one. That's the gambler's fallacy. But again, context matters.
Okay.
Because let's go, for example, to you have a basketball player. You have Lorenzo as a basketball player.
Okay.
And he shoots. He's usually like a, let's say, 30% three-point shooter. Okay. The game starts, and he's 3 out of 4. Okay. What's the probability of the next shot taken to be successful? Is he going to stay to that 75% that he's shooting right now? Or is he going to be regressing towards his mean of 33.3%, 1 in 3? Well, context matters. If it's going to be random shots, a lot of them, regression to the mean is what will happen.
Yeah.
But I repeat, context matters. Maybe in that specific game, he gets a lot of open looks because the defense is bad. He has better shot selection. Maybe he has been working more on his three-point shot that he previously has. So maybe that 3 out of 4 is going to continue for the rest of the game. If those conditions remain constant throughout the game. So, okay, gambler's fallacy and regression to the mean are two different statistical phenomena. Okay? But the important thing is context matters, dictates what's the answer to that question you asked earlier. Yeah. And, I cannot overstate, I'm going to be very, annoying, by repeating that context matters.
Yeah,
is what dictates how we interpret things. To give you a more practical example for our case, for startups and business and so on, you have a 5% conversion rate for website visitors to product registrations. Okay, and that's been the case for the last 6 months.
Okay.
And you have another month where it goes to 10%. Okay, what's the next month going to be? Is it going to be 10? Or is it going to start going towards 5 again? And the answer is depends.
Yeah, of course.
Have you made any adjustments to justify that jump from 5 to 10? Maybe you analyze all your data and you discovered something that it was a big improvement. So yeah, maybe if that's the case, it's going to continue at 10%. Or maybe there's some seasonality hidden behind that. Maybe you're selling candles as it's close to the Easter break. So
yeah,
there's all of a sudden a very big spike. So again, context matters. How you interpret a spike or an outlier will depend on the context and the situation.
Of course. Have you seen a movie Uncut Gems? It's with Adam Sandler.
Where he's selling diamonds or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very fast-paced movie that makes you feel a bit uncomfortable.
I had it in my watch list, but I never actually watched it.
Anyways, in there is he's addicted with gambling actually, and they bring him some gems that are very rare and huge and in good condition. And there's a basketball player that goes to his shop and he wants to take them, and he believes that this gem is very lucky, and if he has it. The basketball player.
Okay.
He will be lucky as well.
All right.
Anyways, and he takes it and he goes to play next game. And because he believes that the gem is giving him power, he's very confident and he throws all the 3 points and they go in and blah, blah, blah. And Sandler betted on him because he knew...
Yes.
It gave me a bit of... this discussion gave me your previous example, for instance. Gave me...
Yeah, I mean, in those cases... Confidence again is another part of the equation that completes the picture of the context.
Yeah.
Obviously, in any stressful situation, like playing an important basketball game, confidence is a very huge advantage.
Even if it's so funny, like Even if you make fun of the people that believe that something is like and blah, 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 like if they believe it, it works for them.
Yes.
So it's real for them. It's very annoying.
It is, yes. If you go to, hard scientific territory, like quantum mechanics, context matters. I mean, there's a very famous theorem. It's called the Cohen-Specker theorem, which basically introduces the idea of contextuality. And the whole edifice or enterprise of quantum mechanics really depends on, context. And what is context? When you try to determine the value of something, your whole experimental setup matters.
Yeah.
The value of what you're gonna discover depends on the way you try to measure it.
To be honest, when I first came here, because as a designer, we don't really get that technical. When we build a website, we don't check conversion rates. We don't check numbers, increased and percentages.
Yeah.
It's not related to the field. But when I first came here, it was very interesting for me to be introduced to this logic, like, okay, you changed this website. What was the impact?
Yes.
Did the number change? Like, it made me go in a mindset to be curious about the numbers and be like, okay, I did this change. What was the impact? Did I waste my time? It gives you that great feedback and that many lessons that at some point you learn how to best allocate your time. And when it's the time for a redesign, when it's the time for a rebranding, or if a company is fairly new and the product is not even done yet, we can make a simple one-page website that describes a little bit what's going to be coming here. And when they have the product, then we revisit, redesign, and it gives a very nice lean approach that I wouldn't have with my designer background. At my school, we didn't learn about all these things,
Yes, there are two important things here. One is the companies we have here are not, one-off projects for us. It's not like, okay, design a campaign or design a website or a landing page or a social media posting strategy, give it out, get paid, bye-bye. We are for the long run with all those companies. We are not just co-founders in a, in a legal way, as in our name is in the same document of who founded the company. We are building that startup together. What is common for most startups is that all us humans, whenever we have to make a decision or have to take an action, we operate on very limited knowledge about the situations we're in. We know what we know, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And sometimes what you don't know is very important. And it's a far larger set than what you do know. And you have to take action, discover new things, readjust, reevaluate. I think that sounds a bit like a line from Jocko Willing.
True.
You fail, you get up, readjust, reevaluate, refocus, go back at it again. Again, you stumble, get up, readjust, reevaluate what you've done, what you haven't done. What are the consequences of what you did again. And that's how it is. Not just in startups, in everything, everywhere. So that's why all those counterintuitive examples or statistical fallacies or whatever you want to call them are important. It's not... Okay, there are intellectually interesting, as puzzles or quizzes. But most of all, there are lessons and warnings.
Of course, yeah.
And, as we said, paradox is a very specific thing, It's when there is a contradiction and logic breaks down. And I'll give you a very hands-on example, So I have this piece of paper here, and I'm going to write the statement on the other side. Well, my handwriting is not the best.
That's right.
Is true.
Okay.
And then I'm going to write on the other side the statement on the other side is false.
All right.
So I'm showing you this. The statement on the other side is true. Okay?
Yes.
So I turn around. The statement on the other side is false. Okay, wait a minute. I said that this is going to be true. So this is true, which means the statement, when I flip the card, is going to be false.
It's going to be false.
So this is false, that the statement on the other side is true. Therefore, the statement on the other side is false. If this is false, means the other is true, but then the other is true, which means the other is false, and so on.
So it doesn't make
that's a logical that's a paradox, because it that's a self-referential problem, but you know, we result into a contradiction.
Yeah.
Which is something that mathematics doesn't like.
Of course.
But unfortunately, we have to, you know, make our peace with it, because at some point in the past, a guy came along, Gödel, I think it's pronounced something like that, which came up with his incompleteness theorems. Basically had every mathematician going nuts about those theorems. Because we like to think that maths and arithmetics are two things. And I'm going to describe it in very simple terms, because it's a very counterintuitive, very revolutionary idea that caused a lot of problems when it first came public. You know, mathematics is both complete, or for any system powerful enough that includes basic arithmetic is complete, meaning that you can prove all statements within that system, and it's consistent, which means it doesn't produce any contradictions.
Okay.
And Gödel basically proved that you can have both. If you have a system that can prove any statement, it will basically be statements within the system you cannot prove with the system itself. Within the system itself, you have to have something from the outside to prove all the statements. So basically, you either have consistency or you have completeness. You cannot have both.
Do you think...
You can imagine why a lot of people went mad during that time, mathematicians.
I think this is more describing, for instance, physics, or not? Like, you know, the three-body problem.
That's for basic arithmetic. Okay. So if basic arithmetic has that kind of issue, imagine what happens to more complex systems that were not as well defined and robust as basic arithmetic.
You know what it brings me in mind, correct me if I'm wrong, is that like when you do physics in the school and you did like problems that you have to find solutions and you apply gravity and forces of you usually take some asterisks and you say, for instance,
we assume this and this and this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
in a vacuum
you make
blah,
approximations.
blah, blah,
yes.
Yeah, and you simplify a lot.
Yes.
But in real life,
all models are like that. Every single model, the more complex model in existence is like that.
And it brings me in mind these two things, that what you do in school, and if you try to calculate it in the real world, you have to make a million smaller adjustments, the wind, this and that.
And the thing is, it gets even worse, because most people will acknowledge that, but will think that that only holds in, you know, complicated systems, like the weather patterns. It's very complicated, it's a very sensitive system. You know, a small change somewhere can mean a big impact somewhere else, and so on. In reality, that also holds true for some of the most simplified cases. So, in my academic career, let's call it, it's not, but...
No,
I started a PhD in theoretical astrophysics, and we tried to work on astrophysical jets. So What's that? It's like emissions from certain bodies like neutron stars and so on.
Okay.
And in order to do that, we started with the most basic assumption. We have like, a couple of electrons in the system that they go around this thing and then are emitted. And the emission or the beam or the jet consists of like one electron.
Okay.
And you start working with the equations and all the physical laws, and there's this idea of an analytical solution. An equation can have solutions that you can find out with certain theorems, and you get exact numbers, real numbers, okay? So it can be 1.3333, that's a real number. And you end up with some solutions that you can fit into that equation, and it satisfies the equation. You cannot solve them. They are not solvable.
Okay.
So you have to go through other means of solving them. Stuff like, it's called the Monte Carlo method. When you start putting random numbers until you get a good approximation from one side being equal to the other. You have a variable x, and you try different values for it until you get something that
makes sense.
Closely satisfies that equation. That's called the Monte Carlo method. And even for the case with the 1 and 2 electrons, we couldn't have an analytical solution for that equation we ended up with. So the most simplified picture of the specific issue about astrophysical jets did not have an analytical solution, and we had to resort into Monte Carlo methods and other methods of approximating a solution.
Are you familiar
Imagine
with
what happens when you have a proper astrophysical object, like a neutron star.
So this thing
how messy that is.
Yes.
How messy that is.
How many times it magnifies?
It's impossible. That's why you hear, the weather broadcast, and they tell you what the weather is going to be in 5 days' time. It's a joke most of the times.
Are you familiar with the three-body problem? Yeah. It reminds me of this a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice demonstration of that even...
But when you have two bodies of masses, let's say, or planets or whatever in space, right? I guess, and they kind of come close to each other, you can find the exact pattern or how they will go into each other and all the movements. But when you introduce a third one,
the complexity explodes.
Yeah. It's nearly impossible to predict, actually, the pattern of the...
Yeah, I mean, it ties in with what we have discussed so far. That, reality is very messy. And you have assumptions.
I had an assumption. Like the first time I heard about the third, but I was sure that
how hard can it be?
Yeah.
How hard can
they already know how to do it. I was sure.
Very hard, it sounds.
And it turns out, and you're like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah. No plan survives first contact with the enemy. When you have your assumption and it has to confront reality, which is extremely messy, a lot of things are going to break down.
There are a lot of riddles. Mathematical logic riddles. And there is also paradox. Like the riddle, I think it's like very close to what you said, that if you follow a logic, you come out with an answer that is the answer to the question. But the paradox is you go inside and you try to follow and you are like, this doesn't make sense. And I think that the riddles leave you with satisfaction, and the paradox leaves you frustrated that you wasted all this energy in order to go through this logic and decide that it's a paradox. To be honest, I realized recently that your studies were around Richard Feynman. Richard Feynman's work
not really.
or not?
No, my first degree was physics, so yes, in a way, of course, it's
like it was his work. It was part of your curriculum.
Yeah, I mean, I think for every physics undergraduate student, that's true. I mean, if you're gonna study electromagnetism, for example, you're probably gonna be having Feynman's textbook in your library, most likely.
I think we are very lucky that we have footage of him on YouTube and you can watch him talk. And it's so...
Apart from anything else, he was and still considered a great educator.
Yeah,
a great teacher.
You can see it from a YouTube video, actually. It's very impressive.
He's amazing at that.
The way he's expressing...
Transferring knowledge and explaining stuff even to people without the technical knowledge.
Exactly.
Of the average physics student. But yeah, most of my training or background goes to quantum mechanics and the foundational aspects of the theory.
I think it's
which is a wacky theory in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But it has a very important takeaway that, again, I'm going to repeat myself. I don't know how many times I've said it, that context is king. It matters more than anything. Context is not just an interpretational framework for something. It's an integral part of it. The ultimate context in any system is us. No, I mean, it's no joke, it is. And in some ways that's very empowering.
Okay, yeah.
Because we like to think of discoveries or science. We have this, Albert Einstein idea in our heads. That he's, the sweet, wise old man that sits in his desks and by thinking discovers truth or something like that. Truth is that you have to go out and probe, interrogate, and force the mystery out of nature by yourself. It's not gonna give you anything for free.
Yeah.
So we
question things, think out of the box, have open conversations. Like, how many times we hear, like, this scientist was emailing by letters that mathematician, or, like, I think it's very important to open conversation with like-minded people or people that challenge you.
I mean, the way I think it works is you have a hypothesis A, I have a hypothesis B. I try to challenge yours, you try to challenge me. I try to improve mine in order to pass your challenges, you try to improve yours in order to pass my challenges. And that's the process where we start, by, mutual challenges to reach, a mutually accepted or even true answer to something. It's not by, I'm gonna sit in my room by myself, I'm gonna produce a hypothesis or a theorem or whatever, and you rest have to agree with me. Because
that's the idea for a lot of people, that they think that this is what Einstein did, for instance.
Well, it's not, but they have the idea that you are the wise scientist that meditates and truth comes to him.
Yeah. Something like that. Exactly.
It doesn't happen that way.
And also this brings another very cool conversation, that when you get successful, a lot of people will remind you how lucky you got, but until you get successful, a lot of people will judge how much you work. Or, for instance, if you go to the gym every day and suddenly your friends tell you, let's go out for a drink, and you say, I can't because I have to wake up 6 o'clock in the morning, they will make fun of you for that statement. And man, what the fuck, come, blah, blah, blah. And when the summer comes and you go to the beach and you take off your t-shirt, there will be, man, you have genetics, you lucky bastard, and stuff like that.
And that doesn't mean that, some successful stories are to some extent attributed to chance.
Of course, luck is involved, everything, but...
I like the idea that, and I don't know if it's attributed to something or it's a common saying, that, luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
That's a very nice quote, because it makes you understand that you will get your chance, but if you're not ready, nothing will come out of it. if you haven't done the work prior to that, and
or another way of putting
and grind,
no.
when the chance comes, because it will come supposedly, but you will not be able
to either see it or to grab
yeah.
it and take advantage of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And or another way of putting it is the Stoic approach, from Stoic philosophers. You have to focus on what you can control and what you can be responsible for. You can't control, and you are responsible for how you use your time. You are not responsible how others are going to react to what you do. Like your friend saying, "Why don't you come with us? You nerd, you whatever." But you are in full control of what you do with your own time.
Hard times create,
Yeah, hard times create hard men create good time creates soft men create hard times.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is what David Goggins actually says, paraphrasingly, that it's very easy to be successful, no matter what this is. Because everybody's distracted.
But it depends on what's your definition of success is.
Yeah.
For someone like Goggins, I don't think the definition of success is how much money you have in the bank. Is something that is more internal in how you cope with struggles and how you can push yourself and improve yourself every single day, every single time.
Yeah.
So it's a radically different definition of what success might mean, in the social media and in this day and age in this generation.
Mention it because some people are not familiar with him.
Yeah.
But I believe it as well that now is the way easier. That everybody's distracted, scrolling, and they waste so much time. If you see the stats, I think it's like 7 hours per day people using their phones. It doesn't add up. Because even if you are in school, you're supposed to be in school for at least 8 hours.
Yeah.
So it means that you are scrolling, being at school, you are scrolling, eating with your family. You are always half there. You are never 100% present.
Exactly. And we did mention something like that in the previous episodes when we talked about work and versus talent. And it's similar in the sense that if something is easy to achieve outcome A, you're obviously not going to push yourself or try very hard because you can achieve it, relatively comfortably. Okay. What that creates is a bad habit of not pushing yourself or not trying hard enough. That habit becomes you.
Becomes second nature at some point.
It becomes
if
you.
You entertain it that much.
You are that.
Yeah.
They're not trying hard enough. And you're not going to try hard enough for anything. And when a real challenge comes along, how are you going to deal with it? And also about wisdom, I like a quote that I've heard recently, that knowledge is knowing, for example, that tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad.
Yeah, man. That's one of my favorites.
I laughed a lot when I first heard it.
Very good. And it's very fitting a lot in meeting rooms, I think, for a lot of situations. And also I think it's fitting, there's a saying, I think it is. As I see here, Cherokee Indians, you know them. It's a saying from this culture.
From
actually.
that tribe.
Yeah. Okay. There is a boy that goes to ask for advice, yeah. And the boy says there's a fight going inside me. It's a terrible fight between two wolves. The one is evil. He's anger, envy, sorrow, regret, blah, blah, blah. The other one is good. He's the joy, the peace, love. The old guy tells him that this is actually normal, that this fight is going inside you. It's inside everybody. And everybody is struggling with these things. And the grandson asks, so which wolf will win in the end? And the guy says, the one you feed more. So I think it's very well connected that it's what you spend your time with and what you entertain the most.
There's a biblical quote about that.
Okay.
You sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind. You made your bed, now sleep in it, or something like that.
Yeah,
I mean, they're all the same.
What you reap is what you sow.
Yeah, exactly. They all allude to that same thing.
I feel like everybody knows what they have to do, but it's only 1% of people that actually do it. Like, I feel like you don't need help. You don't need somebody to tell you. You already know what you have to do. but I don't know why. Just a very small percentage of us ends up doing it and following it and becomes successful, no matter what they define success.
That's a huge topic for discussion.
Okay,
I think
close it then.
in a sense, that's also, you know, in a way the topic of crime and punishment. Raskolnikov, I think it's the main character. You know, reaches a point when he starts to expressing the idea of what's the point of, you know, obeying the rules, of being good, or not killing that guy in order to take his money. I mean, what's stopping me? If self-interest is all that rules the world, what's stopping me? What? Not get caught, okay. Apart from that, so is there any ethical imperative? Is, you know, as a lot of people like to state, that there's no absolute in, you know, good and evil and all those things, and everything is relative and all depends. So why do that which is harder and not, you know, something else it's more shady, but it's going to get me the results that I like?
And it takes a stance, or?
It doesn't take a very clear stance,
okay.
in the way that it doesn't try to impose an answer.
That's very good, actually. As a directing side, it's not good when they point the finger and they say, you should do this and that. They leave it, they give you the questions and they let you come up with your own answers.
Distinguishes, you know, great and by and large old authors from new, let's say, authors or creators. The great ones. They don't actually, you know, tell you what the case is. Yeah. They give you a situation and they explain, you know, the whole thing and the players, how they think, how they react, and
let you decide.
It's you that has to make a decision now and a judgment. A lot of those things, they deal with universal issues. They remain relevant and
in time,
from antiquity to today.
And that's why they are classics, actually, I guess.
Yeah.
Because this realization that what I'm reading now, it's actually touching me, and it was written 300 years ago.
Or 3,000 years ago. If you go to, you know, Greek tragedies by Aeschylus and Sophocles, and they're still relevant.
So I think that was it for today. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean,
for me it was a very nice conversation.
It was nice. I mean, my only issue is that all the things we discussed, they were distracting in the sense that there were a lot of rabbit holes we could go in, and it was hard to resist going into one of them, because we both know that if we did that, we probably never return into the main topic of the episode.
We gave at least 5 examples, and we could stay on every one at least 1 hour.
Yes.
So it would take 5 hours, and we didn't want to do that.
And each one we could go into different subjects from that.
Yeah.
So it was difficult trying to stay
on time and on topic, and divide them.
But if you have any questions or something that you want to...
or suggestions, let us know.
You want us to discuss further or analyze further, if we can.
Hit subscribe. I'm still watching the numbers.
We reached over 1,000 subscribers, eh?
Yeah, I want to see actually the impact that it's going to have on the new episode, that when we are in the first 2 or 3 days.
Let's see.
How it's going to be impacted.
Okay, thank you all for your time. Until next time.